Did you know that you could build an interactive game simply with PowerPoint? Let me show you. So I went to Canva and I found some pictures that I thought would be fun for us to build a farm game today. And when I downloaded these files from Canva, I just downloaded it as a PowerPoint. So that's how I came into PowerPoint here today. And you'll notice that my slide already has the background that I brought over from Canva. And then off to the side of my slide is where the pictures that I plan on using are just sitting. So I'm going to rearrange these to make our game. Now I've chosen to use farm animals as our theme for our game. I thought that the bright colors would be fun. And I teach older students, so I don't often get to have the opportunity to play with cartoons. So I think this will be a great fit for today, and it gives me the chance to do something I'm not used to doing as far as working with these cartoon animals, which I think are very cute. So I'm going to set the scene here, and in my mind, for my game, we're going to get the chicken and the pig, if I can move them over here, from one side of the farm to the cow. That's the intention of my game. And I can use this game as an activity in class. Maybe we can't go outside for recess, or maybe I wanted to use this as a review game. And so I can add some questions to this. And then once they answer their questions, then they are able to get a chance to move around the board. However we want to do this. I don't just see this being used in a classroom though. I could see this being used with any sort of group of students, maybe a youth group or something of that nature. But our game can be about anything. We could take these same concepts and we could make them a little bit more formal. If we were working with an older group of students, we could customize it to fit a certain topic. We could make it something that we want to play as a family. Maybe we have a family game night and we want to impress our family with our PowerPoint skills. Really, the world is open to us as far as how we want to use these principles. Now, I've moved around the pictures that I have so far, and I think I'd like to have a few more sheep. I think that sheep usually go together. So I'm going to grab onto one of those sheep and hit Control D, and that's going to duplicate him for me. And then I'm going to get another one going here. So let me build my herd of sheep. Pretty good. That middle one's tail is going to be off the slide, but I think I'm okay with that. For sake of space, I'm okay with that. So I'm going to duplicate again, and maybe we have some more of the herd over in this area. And once I get my game board on here, I may make some adjustments as to where these are lining up. But for right now, I think this is pretty good. So our goal here is to get our chicken and our pig to the barn so that it can be with their friend cow. So that's my intention going into this. Now I do want to add a label or a name to this slide, but before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this slide so I can take what I've done already and use that for my game board. So over here, I'm going to select that slide and hit Control D, and that'll duplicate that slide for me. I'm going to take out the extra slide that I had already. And then now I have that same slide again. My animals are in the same space. And while I am in this process, I'm going to go ahead and finish up slide 1 now that I have copied it. And I do want to add a name to this so that I know what this is. This will be my animal farm game, and then I'm going to add a byline. And choose the font that you want. I'm going to make this one smaller. And then for the colors, I'm going to go with the color scheme that I have going on here with the reds and the greens and the browns. So for the title, I do want to change the color of my font. So I'm going to go to Shape Format and click on Text Fill. And I don't want a color that's close. I want one that is pulling from these red colors. So I'm going to click on the eyedropper and then come find one of the shades that I want. I'm going to choose this dark part of the red from the barn. And that'll copy over that color for me. And then for my byline, I'm going to follow the same process, just pick a different color. And for this one, I'm going to choose, I think this lighter brown would work well. Okay, I like it. Now on to slide 2. This is where we're building our game. For the game, I want to have a game board. To make the spaces for my game board, I'm going to insert a shape. So I'm going to go to Insert Shapes and then find the shape that I want. I'm going to use the rectangle with the rounded corners. And I want this to be a certain size because I've tested this already. So once I draw my shape, it has the handles around it. So that lets me know that it's active. I can go to the Shape, Format, Ribbon. And then under the size, I know that I want mine to be 1.45. You can really make them any size, but that'll make sure that it fits the settings that I have planned for this. And then I'm going to put this where I want it to go. I think this is a pretty good spot right here. Again, I tested this before, so I kind of have an idea of where I'm headed with this already. And then I may adjust my shape again here in just a moment. Once I get my first shape in here, I'm going to make a few adjustments to it. First of all, I know I'm going to be turning the border off on all of my shapes. You could leave the border on if you wanted to. I personally, for this example, I'm going to turn them off. So I'm going to grab onto that and choose Shape Format, and then go to Shape Outline and choose No Outline. And then I'm going to choose the colors a little bit later, and I'm going to stagger the colors. So I'm not worried about the color for right now. So I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate this. So Control D will duplicate it once, and I'm going to move it where I want it to go with the spacing. And the nice thing is that as you're holding down your left mouse key or your left mouse button, you will have these guides that pop up and these arrows, and it'll let you know if your spacing is even. So I'm going to visualize this first one. And then once I do that, if I hit Control D again, it'll remember the spacing that I chose for that one. So that's pretty good. This next one, I'm going to move over. We're going to start making our way over. This is going to be a very short game, but for sake of illustration, I think it'll work. So Control D again, Control D. One more time. And again, I'm using those guides as I hold down my left mouse button. Very good. And then we're turning the corner, headed to the barn. See if I can fit one more in there. There we go. Now it's covering my sheep and it's covering up my barn. So I'm going to move the barn over just a tad and move my little lamb over just a little bit. And I'm good with this so far. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is change the colors for these. Let's see if I move my tree. There we go. So I'm going to, again, pull from the color scheme that I have for the design of this. So I'm going to pull those reds and browns. So I'm going to stagger every other one. So I'm going to grab onto that first one and then hold down my Control key and hit every other one so that I can change the colors of these. Shape Format, Shape Fill, and I'm going to use the eyedropper again so that I can pull from the barn, and I'm going to pull this middle red color from the barn. There we go. And then for these others, I'm going to do the same thing. Click on the first one, make it active, hold down the Control key. Click on the other blue one so I can change it. Shape Fill, eyedropper, and for this one, I'm going to choose this dark brown color. I think that'll look nice. There we go. There's my game board so far. Now again, I chose to make this one relatively small for sake of illustration, but I think this could be a fun game to play, a great place to start learning this skill. So another thing that I want to do is I want to let us know where we're starting and where we're finishing. So on my first shape, I'm going to click on that and choose Edit Text. Here's where we start. double click, it does the same thing. I think I chose 32 there, so I'm going to choose 32 here as well so that it's the same. And for this one, so we're starting and we'll be going up and then across and then down and then over. So I'm going to move this one so that it faces the other way. Now, so once I select this shape, I could rotate it using the handle, but I also can go to shape format and under the arrange grouping, click on rotate, and then I can rotate this 90 degrees to the left. And that quickly turns my shape so that the word is facing the way that I want it to go. Okay, so we are well on our way to getting us where we need to be. Now it's time to move our game pieces over, which we're going to use the chicken and the pig for our game pieces here. And I want them to begin on the start. Well, if I move it over, you'll see that it's behind my start button. So I'm going to need to change the arrangement of what's happening here. So I'm going to click on my little pig, go to graphics format, choose to bring to front. And then I'm going to do the same thing to my chicken. I'm going to choose to bring to front. But this will let them be on top of my game pieces. So now that we have the foundation set here, I would recommend saving at this point. I save often, and there is an autosave feature that you could have on. I don't have this connected to my account in that way, so I don't have the autosave feature on. But I'm going to go ahead and hit the save button. Control S would also save it very quickly for me. Now we're ready for the fun part. But before we get to that, I want to see what's happening. I like to see where we're at before we move forward. F5 or Shift F5 would take me into my presentation mode. So we're looking good here. We're looking good here. So now I need to make it so that my chicken and my pig can move around the board. And we're going to use some macros to do this. Now, I do not claim to be a great designer, and I definitely am not somebody who is well trained in computer science. I have a very basic, very small knowledge of coding and macros. So we're going to make some macros today, and I'm going to keep it as simple as possible. And it's a fun, quick, easy way to add some interaction to a PowerPoint presentation. The first thing that you need to know if you're going to be using a macro is you need to make sure that your developer ribbon is turned on. So I already have mine on, but let me walk you through where you would go if you needed to make this happen. If you go to File and then Options, and then you're going to choose Customize Ribbon. Over here on the right, to customize ribbon for your main tab, you're going to scroll down and make sure that the developer option has a check mark next to it. If not, go ahead and click that so that you have that check mark, then click OK. And now you should be ready to do the next part. So once we're in our developer ribbon, you'll see that there are a lot of different buttons here. We're not going to focus on most of these. We're going to focus in this control grouping. And if you hover your mouse over these different options that are here, we're looking for the one that says Command button. So when I click on the Command button, it's going to give me the crosshairs for my cursor, for my pointer, and I'm going to draw a button wherever I want it to go. Now I'm going to use this empty middle space for my buttons. I'm anticipating that something like this would be done with something that's a touch screen. Now this particular design is definitely geared towards younger children. So I would want to think about where I'm placing the buttons so that they'll be able to reach them. So depending on the device that you're using, you may be able to move your buttons to a different place. For me, for what I think I would use this for, I think this area would be a good place. I'm going to have 3 buttons per game piece. So I have my first one here. I'm going to go ahead and make some adjustments to it. And then once I do that, I'll duplicate it so that I get my 3, and then I'll set my code. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to change what this says. Right now it just has the label for the button, what the name of the button is, and this should be my command button 1. Well, I don't need it to say that. I want it to say that if I click this button, we're going to go up. To change the wording on here and to change the look of our buttons, we need to go into that button's properties. Now again, on your developer ribbon, you have that option here. You can click on properties. You can also right click on your button and go to the property sheet there as well. Now in the properties, this can be overwhelming, especially if you don't have any type of background in looking at this. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of characters here. And I will tell you, on the left, it just simply mentions what it is that you're changing if you make any adjustments over here on the right. So I'm going to only change a couple of things. First of all, I do want to change the caption. The caption is where we have our label. So this is the name of our button. This is the text that displays in our button. So instead of it saying command button 1, I'm going to have this one say up. And then I'm going to change the color for this. And the color scheme, I'm going to make my button the same color as my chicken, and I'm going to make my pig buttons the same color as my pig, or around the same color. So as I have my button selected, I'm going to go to the back color, and this will give me the opportunity to change my button color. So if I click on the drop down, click on palette, this pinky color is the one I'm going to use for the pig. Let me find the one for the chicken. It's going to be this next one. That one is pretty close to it, so I'm okay with that for sake of what we're doing. And that's really all I need to do with those properties. So now that I'm finished with this button, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it so that I have 3 of them. And then now I just want to line them up using those guides to help me make sure that I have consistent spacing as closely as possible. Okay, now I need to change these others. So I'm going to have up, over, and down are the 3 options that I want. I'm going to select that second one. I still have my properties open. So for the caption, I'm going to label this as over, making sure I don't have typos. And then for this third one, I'm going to come again to caption, and this one's going to be down. Now, once I've done that, I'm going to grab onto these 3 and duplicate them. Now, I didn't copy over everything. That's fine. I can go ahead and fix it. So this is going to be the set of buttons for the pig. So for this one over in the properties, I'm going to change the back color. Go to my palette. I'm going to choose this pinky color. And then I need to change the caption. And there I have my buttons. Now I want to make sure I don't have anything else selected right now. I'm going to grab onto all of these buttons and shift them so that I have similar spacing to the left, kind of in the middle, and to the right of this. So holding down my shift key, I'm going to grab onto all of those and then just kind of drag these over so that visually it looks like I put a little bit of thought into where they are lining up. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now our buttons don't work yet. We have them set up, but we need to set the code to them. So I'm finished with the properties. I'm going to click on this little red X up here and make that go away. And let's talk about adding the code. So we need to add the code to these buttons. And before we do that, we want to tell PowerPoint what the name of our pieces are. Right now, if I were to look at everything that's on this slide, there's a lot going on. I have the background image, I have all of these boxes and buttons that I've created, I have all of these animals there, and that's a lot going on, and PowerPoint doesn't really know to label those in a specific way for me. They just give a general label. Well, as I'm building my code to make my buttons work, I want to make sure I know what I'm working with. And so to do that, I'm going to open up my selection pane to make sure that things are labeled the way that I want them to be. So in my home ribbon, and there are different ways to get here, you can get there either by clicking on arrange and then going to selection pane, or you can click on select and go to selection pane. Either way, it's the same place. And what I'm looking for right now, first of all, I want to make sure that my command buttons are labeled the way that I think that they are in the system. And if any of them are out of order, I can fix that. And then I also want to change the name of my chicken and my pig. I'm going to check my command buttons first. I expect this one to be button 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I want to make sure that they are. And over here on the right, as I click on these and make them active, it should highlight the buttons. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. That works for me. I don't need to make any adjustments to that. So I'm going to select my little chicken here, and it is labeled Freeform 3. I'm going to rename this so that it is chicken. And then when I select the pig is labeled Freeform 2, and I'm going to change this to pig. Now that's all that I need to do for this. So I'm finished with this part of my task. So I'm going to close out of my selection pane. And now we're ready to set the code to make our buttons work. For the code, I'm going to select my first button, and I can double click on that button and it should take me into the code for this. So as I'm looking here, again, there's a lot going on. We're going to focus on just a little bit of this. I can choose what happens to each of those buttons by telling it what to do. And that's as much detail as I am able to get into right now for this. So command button 1 was that first one for the chicken, and that one I want to go up. So for this, I'm going to tell PowerPoint that I want this to be pulled from the active presentation. Put a dot. And it's coming from a slide. So I'm going to type in slides, and it shows that that's one of the options here. And the slide that we're pulling from is our second slide. So I'm going to put a 2 with parentheses around it, and then another period. And we're pulling from our shapes because we want to connect this action to our shape, which is our chicken. And so I need to tell it that I'm wanting it to pull from our chicken. So I typed shapes, no spaces, open parentheses, quotation marks, chicken, close quotes, close parentheses, period. And then we want this to move up. So the setting that we put here is increment top. Then I'm going to type a space and open parentheses. And I've already tested this, so I know the distance that I want. I'm going to do negative 120, close parentheses. I'm going to hit save just for sake of making sure that it's saved. And before I go on and continue this code for the other buttons, I do want to test it and make sure that everything is working. So I'm going to close out of that for now, and I want to go in and do a quick test. So I'm going to hit Shift F5, which should take me into my presentation. Depending on your keyboard, you might have to hit a function key in there to make that work. And if you're on a Mac, there are different shortcuts for that. All right, I've only set my first button, my command button 1, and it should make my chicken move up 1 space. So let's see. It worked. Excellent. So now I'm going to hit the escape key to take me back out. I'm going to move my chicken back down. And I'm going to finish the code for each of these. So for my over button, I'm going to double click on that to take me back into the code. Now I don't have to retype all of this. I'm going to grab on where I typed in active presentation all the way through that closing parentheses and hit Control C to copy. And then I need to pay attention to the button that I'm on. So they were in order. My up was number 1, over was number 2, down was number 3. Here it says this is command button 2. So this one I want to go over. So I'm going to give myself what I had before. So it's pulling from this presentation, that slide, that chicken. This time though, I'm going to change this last little bit. So for this one, to make it go over, we're going to change it from increment top to increment left. So it's just increment, no space, left. And then for this one, we're going to take away that minus sign. And so it's just going to be increment left, space, open parentheses, 120. That's the distance that I want, close parentheses, and that's what we're doing for our second one. Now for the third one, you'll see that for me, my command button 3 is already here. If it's not showing up for you, you can make an adjustment to that here. So I can click on this section, click on command button 3, and then I'm going to paste that again. I already have it copied. So if I just hit Control V in this section, it adds it in. And this one's going to be similar to what we did to go up. What goes up must come down. And so we're doing our down here. And the only change we have to make to this one, so it's still increment top like we did for button 1, we're going to remove that minus sign. Everything else is going to stay the same. I'm going to hit save and then just do a quick check to make sure that that's working. Up, up, over, 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 down, down, over. It worked. Excellent. Now I need to manually move my chicken over once I'm out of my presentation. So I'm going to move him back over now. All right, let's do that same thing to these other buttons. And now that we have figured out what our code is, this should be just a matter of copying and pasting and changing one word. So command button 4 up is the same as the command button 1 for the most part. So I'm going to grab onto that, hit Control C, click in this blank space, Control V, and instead of it going to the chicken, I want this to apply to the pig. I'm going to hit save and then change to button 5. This one should be the same as my button 2. So this is command button 2. Grab onto that, Control C, Control V, and I'm just going to change chicken to pig. Hit save. And then our last one should match up with our button 3. There we go. I'm going to save and close and check it out. I'm going to go ahead and start from the beginning this time. So I come into my game and I can explain the purpose of the game to my students. Maybe I have questions that I'm going to ask them to let them know if they're able to take a chance to move or not. Whatever my rules are for the game, I can explain it here. Then we get to the point where we're ready to play our game. I already know that my chicken works. Okay. And I want to make sure that my pig works. Now, we did not do a left button, we just did a right button. So if you wanted to add another button to where you had, instead of just over, you had a left and a right, because sometimes you click the button too much and it ends up in a weird spot, you could follow that same process that we did. And for that one, when you do your code, it's going to be identical to the one that we did for command button 2. And then also the one that we did for command button 5. The only difference then is that you're going to add that minus sign in front of the 120. And when you do that, it'll make it go over to the left. So you could have 4 buttons if you wanted to for that. All right, we got to the end of our game. So everybody's a winner. I'm going to hit the escape key. And then for the end of this, so that I don't end up going to that black screen that tells me that my presentation's over, I'm just going to duplicate that first slide that we had. That brings me to this. I'm just going to duplicate that first slide so that when I get to the end of my presentation, it lets me know to go ahead and stop, that we're finished with it, and then I can wrap things up. One last thing before we're finished is I want to tell you how to save this. Now, since we added some macros, you need to save this as a PowerPoint with macros. So when you go to save it, make sure that you're choosing that this is it's .pptm. It needs to be macro supported. So make sure that you do choose that one. I hope that this is a help to you. If you use this tutorial, please let me know. If there's something that you'd like to know how to do and you're just not sure where to even get started, feel free to reach out and I'll see what I can do to come up with an idea for that. If you didn't know before that you could make an interactive game using just simple PowerPoint and a few buttons, well, now you know.